Welcome to this webinar. What does the UK's product testing sector need to do to become fit for purpose? I am Thomas Lane, the technical editor of Building Magazine. The construction product sector is facing some significant challenges at the moment. Up front and centre are spiralling energy, material and shipping costs. There's also a lot more happening other than those immediate concerns. The industry is also having to contend with the government's plan to replace the CE mark, which since 1985 has been used to show that a product complies with health and safety standards with a UK specific system called the UKCA mark. This is set to come into force on January the 1st next year. This means that products need to be retested to demonstrate that they qualify for the UKCA mark. For some product types, including glass, radiators and sealants, the testing capacity is either extremely limited or does not exist at all. This wasn't a problem in the past, as the tests could be carried out in Europe, but under the UKCA rules, testing must now be carried out in the UK, which might mean creating new test facilities to cope with the demand. If the capacity isn't created and products tested before the 1st of January 2023, then the industry could be plunged into crisis by a severe shortage of compliant products. Allied with this is the new code for construction product information, which aims to ensure that product information is clear, accurate and unambiguous. And there is also the new construction products regulator, who will oversee the market to ensure products are safe. So there's a lot going on. To discuss these issues, I am joined by Peter Caplehorn, the Chief Executive of the Construction Products Association, the leading body representing the manufacturing sector. Peter is an architect with 38 years experience. Prior to joining the CPA in 2014, he spent many years designing buildings and was a technical director at architect Scott Brown Rigg, where he was responsible for all areas of technical compliance, regulations, health and safety and quality control. What Peter doesn't know about products isn't worth knowing. So Peter, welcome to this session. So I guess my first question to you is, what advantages does the UKCA mark offer to the industry and the end user?
Thomas, thank you very much. Good morning everybody, and thanks for inviting me along to this. And I've got to say, the short answer is not much. It's part of the package of measures, obviously, to set ourselves up as an independent nation. And steering away from the political issues, if we just look at products and the technical side of this, then the whole world is a supply chain, and we've seen that with regard to issues through the pandemic. So things are really connected, and in particular, of course, we've got a long history, 40 years of connections of products across Europe. So therefore, it was always going to be a challenge to create a separate entity for the UK product market, and that's what we're suffering from at the moment. Trying to delve into the mix between the UK's ambitions to have its own system, but still ensuring that we hold on to those supply chains in every practical sense, is turning out to be quite challenging in a lot of interconnected areas. And I think that's the real thing. At the heart of this, as you say, Thomas, is the CE mark conundrum. And we are challenged as an industry because of how it's coming together. But as I say, you know, the net result is actually very little currently. There might be advantages in the future, but certainly as we move in the transition phase, industry is challenged by how to navigate this, how to ensure that they continue to put products on the market. So a very difficult period.
Right, I see. And I mean, it might be helpful if you could talk us through what actually is involved for a manufacturer to get that UKCA mark. What was the process to go through?
I'd be delighted, although, you know, I could probably talk for the rest of the day on this, but people would get immensely bored. At the heart of this is a number of things. So firstly, if I just step back to the European system, so obviously we have had harmonized standards across Europe for some time. As part of the certification and approvals process, there is a thing called the AVCP system. Many of hopefully those listening will have heard of that. But effectively what that means is it corrals products into a number of pathways to ensure that when they're put on the market, they've been through some sort of testing and certification process. AVCP, as I say, has been around, has been established for a very long time. It's understood by the products arena and understood by the wider industry very well. Now, within the AVCP system, there are a series of subsets from 1 to 4, and they require manufacturers to have different approaches depending on how they're putting their products on the market, what their product is, and what harmonized standards actually exist covering that product. So when we move to the UK system, basically the UK government has taken on board the EU system and really just tweaked it at the moment to be a UK system. Now that's fine, except when we get to a situation where we are looking at products in construction, because some of this does affect products in the wider economy, but not in the same way. The construction products regulations deal with all of this slightly differently, and that has caused some confusion when we've had general briefings about products, but looking at the detail, that actually doesn't cover construction products. So when we look at how this is going forward through the AVCP system, certain product types have testing facilities in the UK, and that's fine. And you've already said that under the new system, then any product that has a harmonized standard, which is now embraced by the UK system, then those products have to go through a process of retesting, recertification by a UK-based entity. And that really gets us to the nub of the situation. In particular, the products that are of concern are System 3. The other systems, the subsets of the AVCP system are not as challenged as critical because there are facilities available. Getting products that in part or wholly are System 3 is really difficult, and that's what brings us to the crunch for the industry. So as you've already mentioned, product types such as radiators, glues and sealants, actually high specification glass and passive fire protection products all come into this arena where they are challenged, because simply to get them into the new CA arena, as I've said, they have to be UK tested and certified. And that's a real challenge because we simply do not have those facilities, or if they do exist, they're very, very limited. We've gone from an arena across Europe of around 770 testing and certification organizations to just about 70. And that has caused a significant amount of problem. Just down the track though, we also have other problems of regulatory alignment, and if we've got time, maybe we'll touch on those. But at the heart of this, it is simply that we have taken a universal European system, tried to adopt it into the English system, and of course that has caused us an immense amount of problems in terms of all of these products take a long time to be put through any of these systems. Glues and sealants, for instance, can take up to 18 months to go through just the certification and testing process. So if you're starting from the point of view of not having a UK facility in the first place, that has to be set up, which can take, arguably probably a year. And then you've got a year and a half of work to do on the products before you get to a point where you can actually put these things on the market. A real challenge. And I hope that's not been too tedious for everybody to understand.
So, I mean, Peter, how many products are we talking about? I mean, you mentioned some specific examples there, but I mean, do you know roughly what percentages we're talking about if you're looking at the whole sort of suite of construction products?
I don't. This is a really, really big challenge actually to try and quantify the problem. Really, we are only able to talk in terms of product groups here. And when we started this conversation with government, we didn't actually have an appreciation of how many standards applied in terms of what is now called designated standards. These are the old harmonized standards from Europe. There's been some analysis now done by government, and we have 440 appropriate standards, applicable standards, I should say. So that gives you an idea. There are broadly around 2,500 standards which cover construction products in the main. There are others on the periphery. So it gives you an idea that there's probably about a quarter of all construction products that are affected by that they're covered rather by designated standards, and within those there is possibly around 2/3 that might be caught by this situation. It's easier to talk about product groups because that's something that everybody understands. I think for me the most crucial point here is that those product groups are essential for the completion of projects. You know, you can imagine that if you take away radiators, glues and sealants, take away glass, you've covered quite a significant amount of common products that are needed to ensure every project is completed. And if they disappeared from the market, even from a time point of view, in a small period of time, it would be catastrophic, as you say. And this is on top of all the other issues that I think probably everybody is pretty much aware of that are constraining product availability at the moment.
Right. And I know, you mentioned an 18-month period to get products through the process. I mean, well, we're nearly June, aren't we? It's just over 18 months before the deadline. I mean, where are these companies? I mean, is there a huge queue for test facilities, or maybe they haven't even started yet?
I'd characterize this in a number of ways. So first off, you have some companies who have absolutely tried to be proactive in this, and they've sought all sorts of alternative ways of ensuring that they can get CA marking. And as I said before, you know, of the AVCP categories, systems 1 to 4, it's only 3 that's affected. So a lot of products have already been through the process where testing facilities and certification is available in the UK. But of course, you've got to say that has been an enormous economic drain on the industry. So there's been countless retesting, countless recertification, all at manufacturers' cost. And really, have we actually effectively technically done anything different? No, we've just gone through the process. So that's the first point. Second point is there are groups of companies who are really beside themselves. That's the only way I can describe it, in terms of the pressure and the tension, in terms of how do they maintain providing products onto the marketplace when we have this period of indecision. And so there's a group that just said, well, it'll be what it'll be. There's a group that are really worried. There's a group that's tried to be proactive. As I say, really challenging time for the whole industry. And if I can just bring in at that point, of course, we have many companies that are overseas headquartered or are part of a pan-European group. And again, that their perspective is, well, we continue to supply the UK as best we can, but if we can't, then we are just servicing Europe. And we have many examples now of product ranges being curtailed for the UK because effectively manufacturers are not prepared to put up with all the additional expense and administration to feed products into the UK. So again, we are suffering as an industry from the point of view of product availability.
So, I mean, could that push up prices for certain product categories?
Absolutely. I think we have a perfect storm here in that clearly, you know, if you can't get the normal product that you want, you are restricting the amount of products for any particular topic that are on the market. And normally when that happens, it will push prices up because everybody is still trying to search for the same thing, and there are less of them. And then that's on top of the general hiatus caused by the pandemic, the continued frustration of supply chains from China and their COVID situation, and of course containers being much more expensive but also out of position across the world stage. And on top of that, you've got energy, both in terms of resilience of supply, but also in terms of just cost. And for all of the high energy user materials groups, this is significant, and most of these costs really they will have to pass on in due course, and we will see that as significant, and we've already started to see significant inflationary pressure across the whole product sector.
And so, I mean, sort of going back to the sort of the UKCA mark testing, I mean, is that a very significant, I mean, you mentioned it is expensive, but is it a very significant cost when you're looking at all these other factors?
Sure, Thomas. I mean, if you look at it in the round, there are certain sectors where it is a significant cost, but not in terms of the overall volume of business. Having said that, you know, every company wants to run things as efficiently as possible, and if you're taking a hit of several £100,000 to effectively advance nothing, that in the business is significant. And I think one of the real concerns is the fact that we you know, continually have a push to be more productive, to be more efficient, and this kind of change is gnawing at those criteria. Everybody wants to move forward. We want to try and step away from the issues of the past and ensure that products are fit for their anticipated use, and ensure that everybody's clear on what products to use in what location. But I think the issue for me is that this is currently a bit of a dead weight around certainly around the product sector, if not around the whole industry, and we really have to move forward.
And I mean, you know, again, you mentioned to European manufacturers. Is it the case that they have to, if you're solely a European, you know, if I'm a sealant manufacturer and I'm based in France and I want to sell into the UK market, I have to test my products in the UK. I can't test them in France to get this UKCA mark.
Yeah,
right.
And I have to say that there have been many in Europe who've woken up late to this problem. You know, and so they're a lot of companies in Europe are still catching up. Even I might say there are possibly quite a few who are actually just going to continue trading until they're told not to, because another element to this is the fact that under the new building safety regime, we have got a new product regulator, but they're not in place. And so we're dealing with a surveillance system which is reliant on the existing trading standards organization, and we know that trading standards are stretched to cover all of the things that they've got to cover. So you've got to ask yourself, is there a likelihood that products coming in that are still CE marked when they should have been through the new process, are they going to get picked up? Possibly not. And so again, you've got a situation where a lot of UK-based manufacturers are feeling particularly put out if that starts to happen, because they are trying to do the right thing and go through the process, where there's the prospect actually of imports coming into the country, which would just carry on regardless, without going through the process at all.
And presumably it wouldn't be realistic for building control to pick up on this and sort of check the UKCA marking of every product on the building.
Very difficult, you know, and again, you know, we look to a future where things are joined up, particularly maybe with digital scanning, with all sorts of things which are just on the horizon. But yeah, I would find it amazing if we got all this picked up. It should be, but I just don't think there's the capacity in the current system.
And I mean, what about the test houses? I mean, are they sort of, do they see a market here and they're going to build more test facilities, or they're not? They're quite happy where they are.
Well, no, I don't think they're happy where they are. But I think that, you know, number one, the test houses, of course, cover wide range of products, not just construction. Some are dedicated to construction, but a lot cover wider fields than that. And I think they find themselves in a bit of a haunted dilemma, because if you think about it, we are going through this process, getting products CA marked, but it's likely to be a real rush at the moment to get all the products needed through the system. But then it's likely to trickle away as a business proposition. So can we encourage testing houses and certification bodies to expand their capacity where the long-term marketplace might not be there? So I think that there's been a challenge on that front as well. Whilst they understand, what should be done, I don't think that the business proposition is there to encourage all of them to invest. And another element to this, which has been really, really difficult to work through, is that we haven't had a sensible level of coordination across the testing bodies until relatively recently, which has been a shame. They've started to come together now to work things through, but we could have done with a lot more support from government, to be frank, in terms of making sure that the whole sector is coordinated and really able to take up the challenge. Again, we've had many years of this being done on a European front, and suddenly getting that whole industry to reorganize from a UK point of view has been yet another challenge on top of all the rest of it.
And you mentioned government. I mean, I know you've sort of obviously put the case for the sector to the government, given the challenges. I mean, what's their take on this? I mean, is there a possibility of a further period of grace on the deadline?
Well, first off, we have continued for the last 18 months. Certainly, we've continued to put the case to government. We've had good engagement from officials, and we have, as I say, increasingly made the case to ministers to make sure that they've understood where industry is focused. And certainly for some time now, we've had feedback from government saying, yes, we understand the problems, yes, we are looking at solutions, and yes, we are preparing to launch those solutions. The thing that industry is worried about is that obviously time is ticking away. The current deadline is at the end of the year. Many supply chains are now requiring product manufacturers to actually CA mark earlier than that, because they don't want CE mark products left on the shelf if that might happen. So there's increased pressure to actually get all this done quicker in some parts of the industry. Now, there is a key point that uncertainty is just the biggest drain on resources that industry can face, and that's what we've got at the moment. So we continue to ask government, please, can we have your considered responses? What we're after is a smooth transition, and we hope that government in its response will be acknowledging that that's exactly what we need. But to answer your direct question, I don't think, from what I understand, that there will be an extension to the time period, but that's okay as long as we can have an accommodation with regard to using existing testing and certification details. The obvious answer to this is to have a transition which would be carefully structured, carefully organized, so it doesn't go on forever, but that would accept for certain product groups we can use existing documentation and existing certification. That then would be worked on to ensure that we get to a point where the UK testing and certification capacity is geared up, and then we can, as I say, smoothly work towards everything being appropriately marked as required.
Right. And presumably any UK-based manufacturer wanting to sell into Europe is still to go through the whole CE mark
Oh yeah, yeah, that continues as well. It's just, I think I would suggest it's slightly easier in that case because it's an established system and everybody knows the rules and knows what's required, and have existing relationships as well to ensure that their products are tested and go through the process.
Right. Okay. I'm going to turn now to some sort of, I mean, you know, all tied in together, but talk a bit about, you know, the kind of, I guess, the sort of ripples from Grenfell. So, I mean, the Code for Construction Product Information came out a while ago now. So, I mean, how's that going to help specifiers?
So, yeah, we decided that that was the right thing to do, and it was something that was flagged in Dame Judith Hackett's report, Thomas. So it meant that we had to do something about product information without a doubt. So ahead of some of the evidence that we were all quite disappointed to see in the Grenfell inquiry, we got moving on this. We formed the product information code out of the work of the marketing integrity group. We designed it using a great deal of consultation, and the heart of that, it is providing a system that ensures that manufacturers pay attention to providing the right information, that information that could be trusted, that information is kept up to date. And when I say information, I mean through all channels, if you like. So that's information provided by salespeople. It's information through websites, through technical literature. The whole range of information has got to be reliable and trustworthy, and as I say, up to date, and clearly easily accessible for those who want to use it. So we are now in the early stages of the launch. We have companies queued up to go through the process. This will require a fairly stiff auditing of all the detail, including the company ethics and how the management regard all this stuff, and also a regular re-audit to make sure that standards are maintained. Now, what does that do for the product sector? I hope it moves us to an entirely different position whereby all of those who need to look at literature, so designers, possibly clients, certainly procurers, and certainly those in charge of maintaining buildings and running maintenance programs, all of them can rely totally on the information that's been put through the code process. And what that means is that we move to a new position in terms of saying, right, I understand what these products do, and possibly more importantly, what they don't do. And I also understand what relationships go together. Because one of the crucial things for me, and again, this is an ongoing discussion with the new regulator and the new regulations, is we have got to make sure that we understand what product relationships work and what don't, and how you actually procure and construct a safe building. And you need to focus on those relationships. So the code will provide us the building blocks of correct, accurate, up-to-date information. And then I would hope that everybody from that point forward, as I said, everybody in the design team and on site will use that information to best effect to make sure that we then step forward into a new era of new construction processes. And if we see this aligned with the work that's going on in raising the industry's competence, and embracing the new regulator, the new regulatory system, and the new regs that are coming forward, we will start to achieve some of those ambitions that everybody set out in the immediate aftermath of Grenfell.
Okay, and I mean, we've got the Building Safety Act now, haven't we? And that includes it's going to be new requirements for products. I mean, how do you know anything what that's like to look like, and how the construction product information that you're doing will dovetail with that?
Well, we've been talking to the emerging regulator for some time, and we've obviously been following the progress of the bill. And I think the important thing to say first off is, of course, is the bill sets out the primary legislation, and it's a huge amount of legislation, agreed. And the detail, really, the working detail will come along in the statutory instruments, and I believe there are 31 of those proposed. So to some degree, we are still looking at how things will unfold, and of course talking to the regulator about how that works in practice. We know some key principles, though. We know that for the first time, construction products in the round are covered by regulation, which they haven't been in the past. We know there are several duties set out in the primary legislation, and several actions that the regulator can take in terms of imposing conditions on product manufacturers, in terms of taking products out of the market, in terms of making sure that products are used appropriately, when it comes to any fire safety or structural matters, and of course especially with that category of high-risk buildings that's part of the primary legislation. We will be working with the regulator in terms of what the day-to-day process will be, in particular looking at what are safety critical products, and how that works in terms of, as I say, you specify products, you put them together into a design and put them into a project. Products can change their status through that process. So you can take something which is very everyday, like plasterboard. It can then turn into a highly safety critical product as part of a compartment wall, say in the final thing. So we've got a number of key questions that we'll be working through with the regulator, and we want to ensure that we can help with that process. It is of there's no benefit to the sector that we have any doubts over what's required. In fact, most manufacturers like a clear understanding of what's required. They also would like a level playing field, and all of this, I think, this greater clarity, this greater insistence on ensuring that people understand what is being offered on the marketplace, that's to the benefit of manufacturers. It's also to the benefit of the wider industry. We just want to know what we are using, and make sure everybody understands what has been built into the product, into the project, so that we can then declare clearly what is the performance of that building. And I think we've seen how these things have gone wrong in the recent past. And to me, it's a great disappointment that we've ended up in some areas where we have. It's really important that we can, as an industry, say, right, we have a building here that we can absolutely say is safe and is fit for purpose, and of course along the way is as low carbon as we can possibly get it.
Right, that's another challenge as well. I mean, do you anticipate the regulator asking for changes in the way products are tested, but also critically the way that test information is declared? So if it fails, maybe you have to say it fails, it might pass in the third attempt, but it fails the first attempt. Do you think that'd be more transparent across the board?
Yes, I think so. I think that there will be. I mean, in the wings, we've got Paul Morell's report that is looking at just all of the industry in terms of product testing. We haven't seen the response from it yet, but that will be part of the conversation going forward. But I think absolutely we have got to get to a stage where and we have done this with some standards. There's been a review of the 8414 test, for instance, but I think we need to really focus on are tests fit for purpose? Do they deliver what industry needs? And by that, what I mean is that, as I say, all product manufacturers want to ensure that they are very robust, very clear on what their products provide. that's a given. Unfortunately, though, I don't think we often, current situation, we often get all of that properly. There is a delicate position, obviously, in terms of intellectual property, in terms of the unique manufacturing process, or the way in which a manufacturer comes to the market with something. They don't want to give away all the secrets, but by the same token, it must be possible to ensure that everybody is confident that the product actually has been fully tested and does perform as declared. And again, I think, it's pretty regrettable to see that we've had some instances where that's not always been the case. And that's not good for the sector. It's not good for the reputation of the industry. And it's certainly something that everybody I know wants to ensure that isn't part of the future.
Right. And you mentioned the 8414 test, which is a fire test for cladding systems. That family of different components put together, which obviously is critical, because testing a product in isolation doesn't tell the whole story. Do you anticipate more of that kind of system testing going forward because obviously there's so many combinations out there, it's infinite?
Completely, Tom. So yeah, I do, and because I think we must have an establishment of confidence that materials combinations will do the job as required. And the 8414, there's quite a few critics out there. There's quite a few supporters. I think the important thing is it is a proxy test. It's not a test that reflects reality. And I think that's where the criticism comes in. But I think it has been a very useful test for the industry. But I do think, and I see further tests appearing, again, across Europe, there are other forms of testing, small scale testing. There are lots of approaches to this. And I think that we do need to be quite open and realistic about making sure that everybody who uses buildings got confidence that the testing has been done properly. We can look at parallels, certainly in the automotive industry, where they went through a very bad patch of safety until they started to embrace proper class testing. And I think possibly there's a few things that the construction industry can learn from that journey.
Right. Okay. And I mean, there's a lot going on. I mean, so what I mean on the sort of Grenfell side, or the Building Safety Act side, I should say. I mean, are manufacturers doing very much behind the scenes, or are they waiting to see what the secondary legislation is?
I think there's a bit of a misconception that industry has been waiting for regulation. In one sense, yes, industry has been waiting for the regulations to appear, and that is because you don't want to be starting initiatives that are not compatible with the way the new regulatory regime will work. So I think that there's a sensitivity there, but a huge amount of work has been going on right across the industry in terms of reviewing what everybody does. So looking at the whole testing process, ensuring that it can start to build this body of clear and robust information. So the code initiative has been helping there. A huge amount of work going on right away across the industry on competence to make sure that firstly, product interactions are done by people who are competent to do that. So some products are quite specialized, and so you're expecting everybody involved in the design, specification and installation of those products is at all cases competent to do that, and we're working on a framework to ensure that is the case. But there are lots of other parts of the industry that are working on their own approaches to competence, from engineers to installers to building control. There is an enormous amount that has gone on and is going on to really move the industry from the position it was 4 years ago to an entirely different place. I'm an optimist, and I do believe that all that work is going to start to really come to a focus now, because we have the bedrock of the new regulator and the new regulatory system. But it has been making a difference. I've had people commenting to me now that, you know, we see record taking on large sites, making sure that there are photographs identifying what exactly has been installed, making sure that there are quality checks all the time for certainly fire critical issues. So we are in a different place. I wouldn't say it's universal. I wouldn't say that we necessarily, I'm certainly not complacent in saying that it's job done by any chance yet at all. We saw with CDM that it took at least 5 years to gain traction with those changes, and I think we're going to see the same with this. You know, and this is a bigger step change. It's a lot more complicated. I do worry slightly about some parts of the industry that you know, just thinking, well, it's not for me, and I can just keep my head down and carry on business as normal. I would like to say to them that not a chance. The new way of construction behaving will reach everybody, and it will make a change. It might take some time, but it will happen.
Right. I mean, is that going to be a, you know, we've got obviously got a long tail of smaller builders and developers. I mean, is it? I mean, do you think, are they aware of all the things that are going on, or is it they're only going to become aware of it when, if you like, it hits them?
I'm always surprised at despite a huge noise of information, of many channels, and these days, of course, everybody's getting stuff through social media. I'm always surprised at how much time and effort it takes to reach everybody. I would say that the greater majority of the industry are aware, and they do understand this. Some might be in denial that it's going to affect them in any way, but I think, you know, the wave of understanding is moving forward, and we need to keep up the pressure, and we need to ensure that everybody understands this. As I say, you know, the parallel with this has been the way we've changed health and safety. It took quite a lot of momentum, quite a lot of years to get the main part of the industry refocused. That was done. Over the last 5 years, I'd suggest that push, that change, has reached all parts of the industry. You know, even down to the smallest operators. You rarely hear of anybody now putting in 2 quotes, one for scaffolding and one without scaffolding. That seems to be a thing of the past. And so it's the same for the movement towards all these current reforms. It will take a bit of time, but eventually we will get to a situation where people understand there are new duties, new requirements, and above all, new teeth for the regulator in these new regulations. And if you get caught out, you will face those sanctions. You know, it's as simple as that. So isn't it a better route to do the right thing, and to make sure that you know, you're following the rules, following the processes, using the right products in the right way.
Right, thank you. I'm going to ask you a few questions now about some of the sort of, you know, we touched on the sort of immediate challenges of, you know, energy prices and also, you know, shipping goods around, and we've got the prospect of a national rail strike as well.
Yeah.
Now, how is this going to impact on the construction product sector?
Well, let me say, speaking as somebody who remembers the 70s, and I was actually working in construction, and we had ridiculous inflation back then. I think it was 20% plus. You know, it was difficult. It was challenging, and we had back then the miners' strike and rota cuts on electricity, and that caused a significant downward spiral and a long tail of recovery. And so just focusing on the here and now, you know, that we use rail transport to ship around all the heavy materials across the industry. So all the aggregates and all the bulk stuff is primarily moved by rail. But of course we rely on road logistics as well. And of course that's been through a period of huge disruption as well. And what all of this does is it constrains the industry. And we can see already that confidence is starting to wane a bit. You know, we've been through a period of huge demand in the UK, and that has started to fall off a bit. So we rely during these periods very much on the big infrastructure projects to keep going, to get behind, trying to make sure that all public projects are supported. If though we have a situation where we have strikes on the railways, there's the prospect of further increases in energy price, even though it seems that we've got resilience in supply at least. But all of that will have a significant effect. Now, I do think that industry is trying to come together through the Construction Leadership Council to try and figure out ways where we can minimise the impact. You can't clearly offset energy prices. You can't offset the general inflationary pressures. But what we can do as an industry is just to think our way through more collaboration, perhaps more ways of ensuring that we can be clear and understanding of people's positions. And yesterday the CLC published a paper on what it was planning to do in terms of trying to help with inflation. And at the moment that's really about, as I say, ensuring that we've got good communications and we understand people's positions. So we're not trying to hide how these effects may come about, and therefore people can plan. But it's like the rest of the economy, Thomas. It's a really difficult position we find ourselves in.
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, I think you mentioned the issues with shipping containers in China. Also in China, of course, they've had a lot, you know, sustained lockdowns, and still seem to be pursuing that policy. I mean, what impact? I mean, how much is that impacting on the construction product sector? Because I guess some of the products that we use here come from China.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. So around 70% of the products we use in construction are made in the UK and used in the UK. About half of the rest come from the EU, and the rest come from China. So that's in direct products. But a lot of the components that we use, a lot of the ingredients that we use, do come from China. And a case in point, of course, is semiconductors. We know that there's a world shortage of semiconductors. A lot of those are used in the M&E sector, mechanical plant lifts, white goods. All of those have been affected of late. And you know, you can't finish off buildings without those key components, and so that is already a problem. And some of the ingredients and some of the commodities that go into products that are made here, again, all come from China, and so that is having a further impact. Now, we did think things were getting better about 6 months ago. The containers were starting to get regularized across the world because during the pandemic, containers got out of position. And we had a very bad situation in this country where a lot of them came into Felixstowe, and Felixstowe was just full up with empty containers and couldn't actually move things around. That's improved slightly, but we still end up with a situation where the whole world logistics is running rather in a sort of stop-start position, and therefore reliability of products coming into the UK is always a problem, always a worry. And then that impacts, of course, on production in this country, that in turn means that necessarily product manufacturers can't get their products out of the door. So you know, and I think that there is, from what I can see, there is more of this to come until we're in a better position, because until China really gets through its current COVID wave and gets through the significant lockdowns that they've got. I mean, I think it was currently 26 cities are shut down at the moment, which is a significant drain on the normal product production that they achieve. All of that then impacts into the other effects that we were talking about. You know, I've got to say, I hate talking about all this doom and gloom stuff, but it's just being realistic, isn't it? You know, in terms of what we're trying to deal with.
It does seem to be a constant stream of it.
Mm.
And I mean, it would. I mean, because of the issues around China. I mean, do you see sort of onshoring, people trying to shift production back to the UK? Is that a trend that you're seeing?
Yeah, we've already seen companies working away at that. Again, I think these things aren't done overnight. You know, I mean, some of the supply networks, you know, take years to develop and refine. These days, we're talking about very sophisticated, joined up supply chains. So just to move something very simply and onshore it may take a couple of years at least. If we were looking at onshoring any significant commodities, that takes decades. So, and again, at that point, I'd mentioned, you know, the Ukrainian war is having a significant impact on some commodities, steel, aluminium, and you know, I think there's quite a few other significant component commodities come out of Lithuania or who are affected by the impact of the war.
Right. So, Peter, I'm going to ask you, I think, one last question, which probably you might want to think about the answer to this. But I mean, how do you see the landscape for construction products this time next year, given all the challenges?
Bit of a crystal ball question, then, Thomas. Well, I think, and I've got to say, some of this is logic, some of it is trying to be optimistic. I think hopefully we'll have got past the initial impact of the CA mark, and we will be starting to smooth that problem out. Nonetheless, down the track for CA mark, the European Commission is changing the European construction regulations. Now that's over a very long time period, but the changes will impact on some of the processes, and so therefore we will jump from the current situation of transition to CA to then looking at regulatory alignment and standards alignment, and it is crucial. I've seen in the press that some people are talking about the fact we can write our own standards and we can have our own regulations. That would be a disaster for the construction products sector, because the whole industry is based on universal standards, and we get the quality, we get the innovation, we get the certainty of product because of that joined up network, and you break it up at your peril. Basically, there is no benefit to me in the UK going alone for some of this stuff, if not all of it. I think we will still be living with the effect of high energy prices, even though we might have either come to terms with it or we will have started to see some reduction. I've got to say that some of this is not entirely negative, because it's driving us towards lower carbon production. It's driving us towards using more wind, solar energy, which has got to be a good thing, of course. You know, we have seen a huge amount of innovation in products, taking carbon out of production processes, which I think largely goes unseen. But I also think that this time next year, we will have seen a drop-off of demand, and to some degree that will maybe regularize the industry. So we will no longer be in a case of having significant problems getting products to site and making products available, because the whole thing will have slightly have slightly calmed down, and I think that that's good for everybody. And I think also we will be in the midst of a further discussion about the new regulations, because we will know a lot more about the detail, and I think we will be, to coin a phrase, in the thick of it by this time next year, in terms of understanding the practical day-to-day operation that the regulators want to see, and industry responding to that. And I also think and hope that the code for products information will be well matured and working its way, doing its job to ensure that we have reliable and factual information available. And I could go on, but I think possibly those are the main things that I think we'll be seeing.
And I mean, you mentioned the embodied carbon picture. I mean, that's the final question we answered, the last one would be, but just kind of, you raise an interesting point. I mean, do you think all these challenges are helping or hindering the industry's move towards lower embodied carbon in products? I mean, there was a report today by the Environmental Audit Commission talking about this very topic and sort of the whole issues around regulation.
Well, I think it's helping. And I think it's helping from several aspects. I think it's helping because we're moving into a period where regulation is becoming more strict, which I think is a good thing. And that applies not just for building safety; it applies to reducing carbon and environmental performance as well. We've been through a period where everybody's been far too lax in terms of delivering what are required to deliver. So for me, that works just as well for reducing carbon as it does for anything else. I think also in periods like this, everybody wants to gain market advantage, and one of those ways of doing it is to increase the performance of your products, and that helps us with environmental criteria as well. And I think also that there's a process of greater focus on making sure that everybody understands what we are designing and delivering and how it works. And all of that brings us to a point of saying, yeah, the needed change to a lower carbon industry, and also producing products which result in lower carbon buildings, I think is all pushing in the right direction. So for me, there is a chink of optimism in a sea of really bewildering problems, that we can actually use some of these situations to get us to a much better place, Thomas. I think that's the key.
Thank you, Peter. And on that very positive note, I'm going to bring the session to a close. And I'd like to say thank you very much indeed, Peter, for your time. It's been a really interesting and illuminating discussion. And thanks to our audience for listening. And if anyone would like to see the interview again, it will be available to download on demand in about an hour's time. So thanks to everybody.
And thank you.